Even though most days pass by without anything too strange or unusual happening, there's no question that some days are downright bizarre. The world's filled with these odd occurrences, but what are some of the strangest things caught on dash cams? Well, follow along as we cover some of the biggest mysteries to this day. Number 1. Meteor crash February 15th, 2013. It's well known that thousands of objects enter Earth's atmosphere, but they're typically not large enough to survive entry into the atmosphere. One day in February in Russia, onlookers were shocked to see a large, bright object flying towards the sky. The object was so bright, it was blinding to some who were driving to work that day. Many cars were able to capture the object on their dash cams, providing researchers many different angles to study it. When the metro crashed, it sent shockwaves through the surrounding areas. It was said to have the force to break windows of nearby residential areas, with the meteor landing in an icy river nearby, leaving a 6-meter hole. Many were injured from the debris. Next up, how did an officer save the life of a small child? Police officers are often shunned for the actions of a few rotten eggs nowadays, that it's easy to forget that they're there to serve and protect. Stories of officers acting as they should are often overshadowed by the darker stories. However, this story is about an officer saving the life of a small child. A Texas officer received a phone call from a distraught mother who explained that her 3-year-old child had stopped breathing. The child suffered from a seizure and became unresponsive. A responding officer saw that time was of the essence and immediately jumped into action. He began performing CPR on the unconscious child while the child's parents watched in hope. Though the officer was successful in his efforts, the child began to breathe again. He was rushed to the hospital and ended up in recovery. The officer's actions were praised by the state afterwards, as well as by the kid's parents. Just goes to show that not all officers are crooked. Number 3. Police shootout September 28th, 2015. In Fargo, North Carolina, an officer was responding to an account of a man suspected of carjacking. After searching the area for a while, they finally pinpointed his location. The man was on foot in the parking lot. The officer left his car and immediately saw the man was holding a gun, which prompted the officer to shout at the man to drop his weapon. But the suspect wasn't complying. The suspect didn't drop his weapon and instead began to walk towards the officer's vehicle. The officer had to move around his vehicle to avoid being shot at, but after pleading to drop the weapon, the officer had no choice except to fire several rounds into the man. The man fell to the ground and was audibly in pain. The officer rushed over to apprehend him when backup arrived. However, the suspect survived, and it was later revealed that the man was carrying a realistic-looking BB gun. The officer rightly acted in self-defense and gave the man every option to comply. Also, the eye of the storm, August 9th, 2014. Natural disasters can cause a frenzy of destruction, with tornadoes being some of the worst forms of natural disasters, as they're tremendously unpredictable with their movement. In a video taken on August 9th, 2014, an individual was caught stuck inside the middle of a tornado, decided to film what could be the last moments of their life. They were attempting to flee the tornado behind them when suddenly a smaller whirlwind formed in front of them, engulfing the vehicle ahead of them. The storm uprooted trees, flung debris, and mishandled the cars as if they were sheets of paper. As the storm moves on, the footage shows an innocent bystander get up, and it's clear that she's in shock as to what just happened. The driver got out of the car to go to the aid of the woman, and she miraculously was unharmed. Next, what happens when a man doesn't want to go to prison but gets caught by a cop? Officers are trained to take any means necessary to regain control of a situation, which at times can be hard to do, but nevertheless necessary. An officer in Minnesota pulled over a white vehicle and began a routine traffic stop, but after running the driver's record, it was found that the driver had a felony warrant for his arrest. However, the man had no intention of going to prison and began to fight the officer, lunging and attempting to beat the officer repeatedly. Luckily, the officer was able to grab his radio and he radioed in for help, with the man continuing to beat the officer as he lay waiting for help. Nearby civilians heard the screams of the officer and called 911 immediately. Though the man was determined to escape that day, as the officer disarmed his weapon so the suspect couldn't use it against him. Backup finally arrived and the man was placed in custody while the officer was rushed to the hospital and thankfully made a full recovery. Next up is the ghost car. Officers are often told in training to to expect the unexpected. But this footage seems like an exaggeration of that statement. Officers were responding to a supposed drunk driver that was swerving on the roads early one morning when the police arrived and started chasing the car. Though the police chase lasted just a few minutes before the car swerved off the main road to take a side road in an attempt to escape the scene entirely. Just when the police thought they'd cornered the driver, he was gone. The car seemingly phased through a metal fence, one that the officers were forced to stop at. In the footage, the driver's back lights can be seen driving away as the officer remains confused as to what he had just witnessed. People say that the car was able to phase through the fence since it was really a ghost car. There aren't any explanations to disprove this. The only real explanation, other than that it's that car was able to move underneath the fence if there was a ditch there. Still, the fence would have still at the very least been moving when the cops drove up to it, so this doesn't seem very plausible. Number 7. Hell on Earth, May 2016. In Alberta, a large forest fire was engulfing the city in what began as something that wouldn't affect the people living there, before evolving into something much scarier. As the wind shifted directions, the flames began to enter certain residential areas, with the mayor quickly ordering an evacuation of all residents. The resident who captured the footage, however, decided to film the fires as they were almost engulfed by them on his dash cam. The flames appeared to be large and didn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. The surrounding cars are so close to the residents trying to escape that onlookers feel anxious just watching the footage. During the engulfment, the skies aren't visible and the surrounding area is covered in smoke and red flames. Hard to believe that this isn't actually hell on earth. Luckily, all the residents were able to make it out okay, and this stands as Alberta's largest evacuation in the province's history. And there's the crash landing, February 4th, 2015. A driver was filming on his dash cam and caught one of the most horrific events that anyone could witness. A plane had just taken off when suddenly it was falling lower and lower to the ground. It was later found that a component of the plane had failed, with the pilots on board believing that they were higher off the ground than they actually were. So as a result, they shut off one of the main engines, which would prove to be disastrous. There were two drivers who were filming on their dash cams and each caught a unique perspective of a large plane crippling the side of an overpass. Drivers on the bridge had to quickly dodge the crashing plane as if it were something out of an action movie. The plane landed in a river on the other side of the road, and emergency services were able to save 15 people. However, not everyone made it out of the crash alive, as it was confirmed that 23 passengers were killed in the crash. Number 9. Taking fire. War times are dangerous for everyone, including civilians, as there are a number of dashcam videos that show cars dodging mortars and exploding grenades. However, one dashcam video taken in Afghanistan shows something truly terrifying. An army convoy can be seen escorting contractors through Baghdad. Then things begin to take a turn for the worse. Grenades began to explode around them, and shots of automatic weapons can be heard when the convoy quickly begins to speed up in an attempt to make it back to base. The rear guards of the convoy engage the hostiles. This stands as a perfect example of how unpredictable war can be and how disaster can strike at any moment. Luckily, nobody was hurt in this video, but it still illustrates the preparedness of many for this type of attack. And finally, baby driver, May 5th, 2020. Utah police were alerted of an out-of-control vehicle and responded immediately with a white car that was reportedly driving erratically as the police chase ensued. The officer assumed the suspect was intoxicated and he maintained a distance between himself and the car. A few miles later, the car pulled into a driveway and stopped. However, to the officer's surprise and anyone watching the news story, a 7-year-old boy hopped out of the parked car. The kid bolted from the driver's seat and ran up the driveway. When questioned why he took the car, he stated that he was trying to get out of going to church. And with that, it wraps up the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Feel free to leave a comment below on how we did and what you'd like to see in our next video. And as always, thanks for watching.